This conference will now be recorded.
In last session, we were discussing about variables, output variables, input variables, local variables like that. When we are using variables, sometimes we may need to deal with sensitive variables, sensitive data. That type of sensitive information you don't want to be displayed in the Terraform console when we are executing any Terraform apply or Terraform destroy or Terraform plan, whether it's an input variable or output variable. You don't want to display that information in the Terraform console. Some kind of a sensitive information, sensitive variables that can be input variables or output variables, which you don't want to display in the Terraform logs or Terraform console. So how can we make sure that sensitive data, that sensitive information will not get displayed? What we can do to the variable so that it is classified as a sensitive variable and Terraform will not deal, or Terraform will not display that information in the console or in the logs. We discussed already. What we can do, guys? Anyone? We can define sensitive equals to true. We can define that variable as a sensitive as true, so that when we run Terraform plan or Terraform apply, right? So our sensitive information is hidden now. So that can be any input variable or output variable. You can use the sensitive information. Like if you are managing any sensitive data, like database usernames, passwords, or private keys, treat that state itself as a sensitive information. So when we are using sensitive information, it is recommended to define that variable as a sensitive equals to true. So last time we have discussed one use case. Now let me demonstrate one more use case. I want to create, let's say, RDS instance in a database, AWS RDS. If you guys remember, when we guys created RDS manually, did we specify the username of that RDS instance and master password for that RDS instance? If you guys remember, when we created manually. Now same thing I want to create using Terraform. I want to create a RDS instance using Terraform. That is possible, but while defining that RDS resource, we may need to give some kind of a master username, master password. Is it recommended to maintain that sensitive information displayed in the Terraform console or Terraform logs like that? No. So let me demonstrate that use case. Now I want to create RDS using Terraform. I want to create an RDS using Terraform. Now I don't have any RDS instance. Let's say I don't have any RDS instance as of now, or let's say I want to create a RDS instance for my use case. That can be in a custom VPC or that can be in a default VPC. It's up to you. If required, you can create a VPC. In that VPC also you can create this RDS. If you don't specify under which VPC this RDS has to be created, like AWS EC2 also, under which VPC this RDS gets created, if I use Terraform, the default VPC. Now I don't have any RDS instances. I want to create RDS using Terraform. So I can use Terraform the AWS provider. I can use AWS provider from this registry. I can write a code. Guys, in real time also, it is not like everything you are going to define in a single Terraform configuration or single module. For creating and managing RDS, You will have a separate Terraform configuration files, separate Terraform configurations. For creating and managing EKS cluster, you will have a separate Terraform configurations. That can be a single file or set of files in a separate folder. It is not like all the infrastructure you will maintain in a single Terraform code, Terraform configurations. So I want to create RDS, I'll create a separate configuration. Instead of writing everything in the same configurations, I'll write a separate configuration. So let me create the code. First, let me create one folder. Let me create one folder. Let's say, I'll say AWS RDS or something, whatever. AWS RDS, right? Now let me open this folder in a Visual Studio Code so that it will be easy for me to write a code in the editor. So let me open that folder, new folder. I'll open this folder, this folder. I'll start writing the code. I'll start writing the code here. So I'll create a files as per the best practices. Terraform, 1 second. Terraform.tf. In this, I'll provide my provider information and my Terraform settings information like this. So your provider related configurations, like region, under which region you want to manage your resources. I can say AP South 1. If you don't want to hard code this, you can also refer as a variable. We already discussed profile, or you can use access key and secret key also. That also you can refer it as a variable and you can pass. Now this is my Terraform configurations and provider configurations. Now I'll create a actual resources. Now I want to create a resource. Terraform resource block. Let's wait for some time. It is AP South 1. AP South 1. Region, it is region. So let's start writing the Terraform code. Resource, that AWS RDS. So if you don't know, you can go to the provider documentation. Go to this documentation. Here you can search RDS. If you scroll down, there is something called AWS DB instance. There is something called AWS DB instance. So using this, we can create a RDS instance. What arguments we can pass for that in RDS, this AWS DB instance resource type? They have given all the samples here. They have given all the arguments, allocated storage, how much, right? Under which availability, optional. Again, this is optional, right? You have some lot of things, database name, the lot of things are there, which engine version you want to use. Like this, there are lot of arguments. Let me create a database instance, that is AWS. Let me say resource AWS underscore DB underscore instance. Now let's say I will give something, MySQL RDS. Now under this, whatever you want to pass, they have given here. You no need to worry. Allocated storage. So what do you mean by allocated storage? Also you can check. So allocated storage, right? How much storage you want to allocate for that RDS instance. So this is required. This is a required field unless you have specified other options. If this is provided, this is optional. Otherwise, this is required. So I'm saying allocated storage. How much storage you want for demonstration purpose? I'm just taking 10 GB. Like this sample only. I'm taking allocated storage 10. It is in the GB. It is in the GB. Let's take something like this allocated storage 10. Then we have some other arguments, right? Database name, your database name, or that DB name. I'll say DB name MySQL, MySQL RDS, something like this. And also we have a lot of which engine, RDS engine. There are various engines, right? Like Postgres engine, right? MySQL engine, like that. You can see engine. So you have a lot of things, right? Engine. So required unless some other fields are specified. Otherwise, you have a lot of options. Engine, right? You can specify MySQL or PostgreSQL. That what engine? So they are giving some details here also, right? What options you can use here, what type of engines you have. They have given some documentation here. Allocated storage, like engine. That engine can be MySQL, that engine can be MariaDB, like that. You have various options here. They have specified here in the AWS documentation what engine you want to use, right? That engine, that can be MySQL or that can be PostgreSQL or that can be whatever it is supported. Database engine, this RDS engine, like that can be MySQL, PostgreSQL, like that. So I'm going to use MySQL. I'm going to use MySQL engine as MySQL, something like this, something like this. Here, what engine? MySQL. And again, engine version. We have a lot of other fields. Engine version. Again, if you don't specify the latest version, it will be used the latest version. MySQL engine version. I am specifying something like this 5.7, like that. All these things when we manually created, we have used all these things. So I am specifying that engine version. Now some instance class, the RDS instance class, when you guys are manually created, we have provided all these things, guys. You selected engine, right? Whether it's a MySQL, whether it's a MariaDB, PostgreSQL, right? And database name, instance name, right? Master username, master password. This one, instance, database instance class. What type of instance class? Whether you want to take this one, like that. So let it be any sample. Let it be any sample. That is also fine here. I can create using this type of instance also. This type of instance also. db.r5.large or db.r5.xlarge. This instance class. Whatever you want to specify. Whatever you want to specify. Something like this. For understanding purpose, I'm just taking this one, db.r6g.large, like that, this version, that instance, right? Class. Or you can take a micro also to understand. You want to take micro also, you want to understand, right? Instance class. You can define whatever it is. And we have some other options, username and password. This is your RDS username. Let's say I am giving something like this, devdb username, and password, the master password, the master password. Now I am hard coding something like this. For now, I am hard coding something like this. Now, other parameter group, we discussed all these things when we discussed manually. When we created all these things, RDS, we have discussed all these options. Now I am defining like this. Now, if I check in this into a source code, is my sensitive information is hard coded here? If I check in this one, this sensitive information is hard coded, and it is not recommended also. It is not recommended to maintain the data in a hard coded format. But I can use a variables concept here. Instead of using like this, I can use a variable concept. Variables. Variables concept. Let me define a variable. Let me define a variable. Now I will say MySQL RDS, some variable name, username, type of the variable, type of the variable, type of the variable, string, description, the description. I'll say RDS, MySQL RDS instance, MySQL RDS, username, something, some description. Now another variable, one more variable I'll define. Let's say MySQL database username, like this, password, type, 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 string, description, whatever description you want to set, you can set. MySQL RDS, admin password, admin username, like this. Now what you can do, right? You can pass values to these variables many ways. You can pass these values to many ways. Let's say you are passing values to some values definition file. Let's say you have some file. You have some file, maybe, let's say something dev.tf vars. Now you can define a variables values to this one, MySQL password, MySQL username. I will say devdb, MySQL RDS password, devdb, something like this, devdb @123, like this. And here, instead of hard coding, I can refer from the variable var dot MySQL username, var dot MySQL password, like that I can refer. Now here I have defined any type of sensitive information if you have in this tf-var files. You should not check in this tf-var files into SCM repositories again. Suppose you have some sensitive values to the variables assigned in this variable definition files. So it is not recommended to check in. It is not recommended to check in this tf-var files also into the SCM tools. Now let me run Terraform commands from this folder. Let me go to this folder. First, let me initialize Terraform init. Terraform init initialization I am doing not here, here only, right? So I am in this folder. So I am running Terraform init to initialize the required plugins used as per my Terraform configurations. Now it is initialized. Now what I will do, I can run something like this: Terraform plan If I don't pass, it is not there in the default value, it is not there, it is asking human intervention. It is asking human intervention. You need to type the password, MySQL RDS admin password, MySQL RDS username, like that, because we have not defined any value and we have not passed other ways. So this is not going to be loaded automatically. This values file will be not loaded automatically. So it will expect, but I don't want to go this way. Let me press Control C. Now I can use one more option, hyphen hyphen or hyphen var hyphen file option, that file, something like this. Now it is going to use the values, but if you see in the console is that values are being displayed, that username, where is that username? Let me show you. Username devdb in the console, this value, and the password, where is that password? Here, password, here it is getting displayed. But if I make this as a sensitive, some information, if I want to make this as a sensitive, but here the by default it is treating as sensitive only. By default this password is treating as sensitive, that's why it is not displayed. But now let's say I want to make this username also sensitive. What I can do here, I can define one flag, sensitive true, sensitive true, like that I can make something like this. Now let me use Terraform plan or Terraform apply. Since I have marked that input variable as a sensitive, is it getting displayed in the console when you are running Terraform plan or Terraform apply? You can see, is it being displayed now? No. You are hiding like this. You are hiding like this. But you should not check in these type of files into SCM. You should not check in these type of files into SCM if you are using a variable definition files, because again, is your information, is your sensitive information is available in the SCM repositories again. If you check in these TF-var files where you have some sensitive information, yes. So if you don't want to go this way, if you don't want to go this way, can you go with one more other approach? You don't have this var files or you don't want to define. Can I use export that environment variable option? While before running, can I set something like this? Export tf underscore var underscore that variable name. If I don't want to use this one, if you don't want to use this one, there is another approach. You can pass as a environment variable, something like this. Another environment variable. If you guys are using pipelines, if you guys are using pipelines, from pipelines also you can get this in a pipeline, in your Jenkins pipeline or in your whatever pipeline you are using, you can define, you can maintain this information. You can maintain this information in the Jenkins also, and you can read it as a secret. Now I am setting something like this. Now, since I have marked that as a sensitive, information, when I am saying Terraform plan, even though I am not having that file, I am not passing that file. Now these values are used. Since I marked that as a sensitive, it is not displayed in the Terraform console when you are running Terraform plan or Terraform apply. Now I have that set as an environment variables, not as a variable file, but still it is using those environment variable value and assigning that values. But when I'm using Terraform plan, Terraform apply, Terraform plan, Terraform apply, it is not displaying that sensitive information. But here, what it is saying, trying to say, master password has some special character which is not allowed, which is not allowed. So let me reset, let me re-export. I'll say just devdb123. Now let me run Terraform apply. Using that value, it is going to create a RDS instance, but in the console when I am running Terraform plan or Terraform apply, since I mark that as a sensitive value, that is not being displayed here. Let me proceed for creating RDS instance. Now RDS instance is getting created as per that Terraform configuration. Now in the log it is not being displayed. Whether you use output variable, input variable, if you mark that as a sensitive, it is not being displayed in the Terraform console. But in the Terraform state file, it will maintain that sensitive information. But in real time, it is not recommended to maintain the Terraform state file locally. There is a something called remote backend. Like S3 bucket to maintain the Terraform state file. On S3 bucket, you can apply encryption also. The data will be encrypted and maintained in S3 bucket. And also you can apply some policies, bucket policies, who can access that S3 bucket and who has access to the data inside that S3 bucket. So that way, can we secure our Terraform state file as well as the sensitive information in that state file also, if you are using remote backend such as S3? Yes. But now we are using local state file. But in the state file, it is maintaining that sensitive data. Still, you can see that information in the state file because we are using local state file. But if you guys are using remote state file like S3 backend, you can apply encryption on S3 also, so that S3 will maintain the state file in the encrypted format in the rest. And you can apply some kind of a policies on that bucket to restrict the access to the objects in that bucket. AWS concept. So is everyone clear how to deal with sensitive information or sensitive data that can be input variable or that can be a state file also? This is very, very important, guys. Is everyone clear? Now we are using a local backend. Now. If you see, it is creating some kind of a Terraform state. Still, the resource is under creation. Once the resource is created, here in the state file, you can see that confidential information. But if I use a remote backend, instead of creating a state file locally, the Terraform will create the state file remotely in that S3 bucket. Unless until you have access to that S3 bucket, you can't see the state file also, and you can't see the data also. That's how you can secure your state and information in the state file also using remote backend. For now, using sensitive flag in the variable, you are hiding that information in the logs or in the Terraform console. Okay, let's wait for this to be created. It is still under creation. Now if I go to AWS RDS, now one RDS instance is getting created. You can see here one RDS instance is getting created. This is created by our Terraform script. This is still under progress, but it is using default VPC, default subnets, because I have not specified anything. But if required, you can specify various other options also. You can see all these options they are specifying. We discussed about, right, you can create a default you can create a DB subnet group, and you can add the subnets to that DB subnet group, and you can use the DB subnet group also, like that. All these options you can use. For now, it is created, it is successfully created. Now in AWS, if I go to RDS databases, there is one RDS instance. This is created by Terraform, and if required, you can connect to this RDS instance. As we discussed, there is an endpoint, this RDS endpoint. With that endpoint username and password, your applications can connect. But now if you see the state file, let me go to the state file. Now in the state file, still that information, right, the database username and password is maintained. You can see the username, password fields are maintained. But instead of using local backend, if I maintain this, if I use the remote backend, this file will be maintained in the remote S3 buckets also. Okay. Now let me destroy this once you understand the concept. Now after creating, I am destroying, but in real time, are you going to destroy like that? No. Your RDS instance is created. Does your application team can they use this RDS endpoint to connect, and can they connect to this database to read and maintain the data, the application data? Yes. Now, just for practicing purpose, we are discussing Terraform concepts only. So let me destroy once it is created so that you will avoid the charges. Let me destroy once it is created to avoid the charges. Now it will be in progress, but meantime, let's discuss about some other concepts in Terraform. Guys, so far we discussed about variables. In this input variables, that is using variable block, you are defining local variables. We discussed about local variables, that is using locals block. We discussed about some other concept, that is output variables, using output block, right? You can display some information using output block. Now let's understand some other concepts. Data sources, data source, data block, data source or data block. I have already explained this one, but let me explain quickly one more time. So what is this data block or data source? For what purpose we can use this data block? We already discussed, but let me quickly recap. Let me discuss quickly again. Anyone, what is this data block? For what purpose we can use this data block? What data block does? So using this data source or data block, we can get the information about the resources using data source. Terraform data source or data block will allow us to fetch information about the resources that are defined outside of Terraform or defined by another separate Terraform configurations. We can get the information about the resources which are defined outside of Terraform, which are defined or managed outside of Terraform, are defined or managed by another separate Terraform configurations, and we can use that information within our configuration. Example, we have already discussed. Basically, we can get the information. Using this data source block, like suppose it could be existing EC2 instances IP address also. Suppose you want to know the existing EC2 instances which are created already outside of Terraform, you have created, or from another Terraform configuration you have created EC2 instance. If required, you can get that EC2 information, or you can get the AMI IDs information, or you can get some availability zones, whatever list of availability zones which is there in that given region, and so on. So the data source will fetch the information. It will fetch the information and we can use that information, we can use the data source properties in our Terraform code without manually specifying the values. Something like this. This Terraform data source or this data block will fetch the data. It will fetch the information about the resources which are created and managed outside of Terraform, or which is already created from a different Terraform configurations also. You can fetch that information. That information we can use in a Terraform resource block, or you can use that in a Terraform output block, or you can use the Terraform locals block also. Locals block also, you can use that information, whatever we are fetching. So example in the beginning we created a EC2 instance. In the beginning, if you guys remember, we created a EC2 instance using static Terraform configurations like this. We have hard coded the AMI ID. We have hard coded the AMI ID. Suppose if you see, we created a EC2 instance, something like this, hard coded AMI ID. The AMI ID is hard coded to particular value. This may or may not be smart idea here. Let's imagine if what happens if the new version of the AMI become available. Suppose there is a new version of the AMI becomes available. Again, you need to modify this value. Again, you need to modify this value if any new version of the AMI becomes available. So what you can do here in the Terraform configuration, we tied the hard-coded older version of the AMI. Maybe AWS has introduced new versions of the AMI for that Red Hat or whatever it is. So if you want to upgrade to the latest version, again what you need to do, you get the latest AMI ID from the AWS management console, and again add that into your Terraform configuration, and again you apply like that. But instead of hard coding like this, we can use data block or data source. So you can set up a data source to look up. You can set up the data source to look up the latest value of Red Hat or any other AMIs available on AWS, and use that to provision our EC2 instance. Using this data block, you can fetch the way you are creating resources using Terraform. You can fetch the resource information also. You can fetch the resource information also using Terraform, guys. Something like this, and you can apply some filters. You can see here. You can see here, right? Here we are using this data block, and we are applying some kind of filters, and it will contact the provider and it will get the information. It will contact that provider and it will get the information. But so here we are using this data source. This Terraform will contact that provider to get the information about this data source. But what type of data sources also we have available, that is also there in the documentation. If you go to AWS documentation, the provider documentation, if you see, if you take any type of service, whether it's a EC2, whether it's a RDS, whether it's a VPC, there is a resources to create resource. You can, using this, you can create a resource using resource block like this. You can create a resource. The way you have a resources, there is something called data sources also. There is something called data sources. If you see, there is one data source called AWS underscore AMI. So use this data source to get the ID of the AMI for using in this other resources. You can use this data source like this. Similarly, there are various types of data sources. Suppose you want to get some information about EC2 instance types. If you want to get some information about EC2 instance type, there is a data source. Suppose you want to get some EC2 instance details existing created outside of Terraform, you can use a data source like this. You can provide the instance ID. You can filter based on the tags also. It will get that information. Now I want to use this data source. I want to use this data source AWS AMI. So I can write a code like this. Instead of hard coding something like this, what I can do, I can use a data source like this, AWS AMI, and you need to apply a lot of filters. So you can check the documentation here only. What arguments we can use, some sample also here, like this. Now I am using this one. Let me demonstrate. This one by creating a separate project to understand better. So let me create one more, AWS EC2 demo. I will use data source. We already used, but let me demonstrate again. Let me load that. Let me open that folder, separate folder, just to understand easily. I am writing a separate code. That's it. Now here again, Terra, terraform.tf. This is best practice only. You can write everything in a single also. You can write everything in a single file also. I am creating something like this. And let me create a main.tf. Now instead of hard coding to create that AWS instance resource, AWS instance, instead of hard coding here the AMI ID, I can fetch using data source. So here I can specify AMI, but I don't want to hard code. This AMI. I don't want to hard code this AMI ID, something like this. Instead, I can use the data block. First, let me define a data block. Order doesn't matter. Data AWS underscore AMI. This type of data, whatever local name. Now here you can apply lot of filters. Here. As per the documentation, you can apply recent AMI true, something like this. As per this documentation, data AWS underscore AMI recent, most recent true, and owner or owners, it's an array. You can give Amazon also, or the account ID of Amazon, not your account ID, because you want to take a Red Hat AMI managed by Amazon itself, owners. You can apply filters again, based on the various type name. So various types. Suppose the root device type, the root volume of that AMI, AMI root volume should be EBS type, like that. I can apply a filter like this. Root volume type, device, virtualization, HVM. You can go and search in the console also. Before you want to apply, you can go and search in the console also. Now I can apply some other filters also to get the unique value, something like this. Red Hat I need, something like this. You can apply filters also like this. And this here, instead of hard coding, you can refer something like this, data dot aws_ami.local_name.id, like that. Guys, if you want to print that one, you can use output. You can use output name, some name, red hat ami value. If you just use something like this, it will display a lot of data. It will display a lot of data, but within that you need specific data. You can use .id like that. .id like that. But let me show now. Later I will add this resource block. Later I will add this resource block. Now there is no resources, only data block, and output block. Let me execute Terraform plan. Let me execute Terraform plan from that folder. First, let me initialize, because this is a new working directory. There is no providers here. So Terraform init initialization. Later I will format, I'll validate if required, all those comments. So now, if you want to format, you can use a Terraform FNT. If you want to validate, you can use this validate, all these things. Now there is no resource information. I am not creating any resources. Let me show that Terraform plan. It will make a data call to the provider, and it will fetch that information. And I am using output block. I am using output block, and it is displaying the information output. It is displaying everything, the resource information, ARN of that AMI, ARN of that AMI, what type of device will be used, right? And what is the ID, AMI ID, like this. Now, if you want specific field, you need to apply that dot, whatever, that ID. This is output variable. I am just using output to display, but you no need to print. If I print like that, it will only print the ID, AMI ID. Now it is only like this. Now you no need to use output also. You no need to use output block also. You can directly refer in the resource block also, like this. Resource AWS_instance EC2 demo EC2, whatever you want to give. Now instead of hard coding that AMI ID, now I can say something like this, .id. Now instance type. If you don't want to hard code this one, you define as a variable and you pass that one, we already discussed. Tags, right? You can use tags, key value pairs. It's a map, name, demo, EC2, something like this. Now I have not hard coded anything here. I have not hard coded anything here, right? I have not hard coded anything here. AMI ID, I have not hard coded. So this is not required. If you really want to print that information, you can use output. Yesterday we discussed, right? If I want to print the information about this instance also, some IP, public IP or private IP, like that, if you want to print also, you can get output. Something like this, value AWS instance demo.ec2. Some specific value, private IP, public IP, like that. Output. But here the AMI ID, instead of hard coding, we are getting from the data source. So let me show Terraform plan. If you see, this AMI ID is getting fetched using that data block. Now, if I apply this one, Terraform apply, it is going to use that AMI ID to create a EC2 instance. Like this, you can use data block. Like this, you can use data block. Is everyone clear what is this data block or data source? But I am demonstrating with only one data type. But like that, you have various data sources. Another example also I'll demonstrate in some time. But is everyone clear what is this data block, what this data source or data block does in Terraform? Now, the EC2 instance is going to be created as per that data AMI ID. Now, if you see, since I have used output block, is it displaying the public IP once the instance is created? The public IP of that instance as per my code, if you see. And also I use this also as an output, so that's why it is also getting displayed. Now, if I go to AWS EC2 section, I can see one EC2 instance created as per that AMI, as per that AMI, which we configured. So similarly, one more concept, right? You can fetch the list of availability zones also. Let's say you are trying to create some VPC. You are trying to create some VPC. You are instead of defining the list of availability zones in that region like this, instead of defining the list of availability zones, instead of defining that list of availability zones like this as a variable, what you can do, you can use a data block. There is something called availability zone, AWS underscore availability zones also as a data block. If I go here, if you go to EC2 section only, if you go to EC2 section only, not in EC2, yeah, here, you can see AWS underscore availability underscore zones. So this data source, will allow access to the list of AWS availability zones, which can be accessed by an AWS account within that region configured in the provider. So based on whatever provider, whatever you configured here, right, the region configuration. So if I use that data block, it is going to fetch the list of availability zones, something like this. Let me show that data, the data block, AWS underscore availability zones. You can give some name. This is local, like a local name, AWS agents, some name like that. Now here you can again some kind of a filtration. You can apply some kind of a filtration, state available, some other filters also. Whatever you have opted, whatever you have not opted, like that. So state available, like that. So available in the sense whatever is available in that region. So state available, something like this. Now, if I want to print, what information gathered by this one, what I can do, I can use some kind of output block. I can use some kind of output block. So that name can be whatever it is. Now value, if you want to print, you can print something like this. but it will give lot of details. It will give lot of details, but if you want to get specific fields within this data, we will apply some kind of a dot there. Let me show that. Now let me show that Terraform plan. Terraform plan. I am just adding a data block and output block. I have not modified anything. Now, if you see, because of that data block, it is gathering that information. Because of output block, it is printing like lot of information, availability zone names. These are there like that. Suppose you want only names. Suppose you want only names. This is a kind of a, you need only names. What you can say, dot names, dot names. Now it will return only this list of strings, like that. Now let me show the Terraform plan, list of strings like that. Now only 1a 1b like this. Now if I want to use this information, can I use this information wherever I want? That can be in while creating a subnets. Can I use this list of availability zones, or while creating a EC2 instance also can I use like this? Something like this. Again, this is like a list. This is like a list. Can I use something like this based on the index we discussed already? List. Suppose if I use 0 like this, this EC2 instance is going to be created under which availability zone? Because I am referring the data source like this. It is gathering the information and I am using 0. So what it returns? This is returning something like this. This is returning something like this. Now I am using index of 0. So what will be the availability zone value now? This one. Now I am using output just to display. I am using output just to display. Otherwise, you can use a locals. You can use locals block also to assign. You can use locals block also to assign as a local variable. Suppose you can use something like this. Locals availability zones like this. If you want to get all the names, you can use a star. You can use star. If you want to get all the names, you can use star like that. For now, I am using only one indexed one. This EC2 instance is already created in 1A availability zone. So since there is no change, what it will say, 0 to update like that. 0 to update like that. Now let's say, if required, you can say something like this also. 1. Now since the value is going to be changed, it is going to destroy that EC2 instance and it is going to create a EC2 instance. Now because this is going to be deleted, because the value earlier it is in 1a, now it will be in 1b like that. It is going to delete and apply. If I apply, it is going to recreate. Guys, this type of data source you can use for creating VPC also. Just to give an example, right? I can assign it some kind of a locals variable, locals, what I can say, availability zones, some kind of a local variable name. This can be anything. Now I can use something like this. I can use something like this. Otherwise, you can use something. This we call it as some kind of expression. Some expression. We will discuss all these things in a future session. Now it will be like list of availability zones. Now can I use this one while creating a VPC also? Like to create a subnets under whatever availability zones I have in that region. I am not hard coding anything. I am fetching that list of availability zone using data source, and I can create a required VPC, required subnets. Under that VPC, I can create a subnets in this list of availability zones. So you can use data source like this also. Is everyone clear? What is data source? How we can use based on your requirement? Now let me show the output of this something. I can say value local. I am referring a local variable. So I am applying some kind of filter. I'll display this one. Let me show the Terraform plan or Terraform apply, whatever it is. Now you can use this local variable also in your Terraform configuration. You can use this local variable also as a Terraform configuration wherever you need. Is everyone clear? What is data source? Like this, there are various types of data source, but the concept is very, very important. Is everyone clear what is the data source concept? So try to practice whatever has been discussed. Tomorrow I'm going to start very, very important concepts, functions, Terraform functions. There are various functions. We already used a few functions, but in detail we will discuss about some other functions. We used some function like length function. We used some function called merge function already. We used some function called what else we used, guys? Element function, and we used a substring function like this. There are various functions. That functions also we will discuss tomorrow. Functions and expressions we will discuss tomorrow. Very, very important concept, but try to practice whatever has been discussed so far. The variables, input variables, local variables, output variables, sensitive information, data sources also. Tomorrow I'll continue with functions, guys. So once your practice is done, make sure you guys destroy your resources to avoid the charges. Otherwise, if you keep on creating and if you forget, AWS may start charging the resources for whatever you created. Any questions before I conclude the session for today? If not, try to practice whatever has been discussed. I'll continue tomorrow with the Terraform functions and the Terraform expressions, guys. Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.